a letter from a fellow by the name of Mark, who was, I'm guessing, probably the guy who owned the site. And parts of his letter are reprinted over at democraticulnderground.com, and that will link you back to zerohedge.com, where they have the original link to a company of one, what I believe is his website, Mark's website. And I just want to share with you a little bit of Mark's letter, if you'll indulge me, please. He said, "Hello, I am unemployed over 2 years now, a 99er without any benefits for 3 months. I have a confession to make to all of you. I'm a criminal. I've obeyed the 10 Commandments and all laws except I'm unemployed, and that's now a crime. I'm poor, and that's a crime. I'm worthless surplus population, and that's a crime. I'm a Main Street American citizen born and raised in the USA, and that's now a crime, and I am euthanizing myself as I write this note. So arrest my corpse." This is not a call for help. The deed is done. That's not what I wanted. It's not what I wanted. Death is my best available option. It's not just that my bank account is $4 that I've not eaten in a week, not because hunger pangs are agonizing, I'm a wimp, not because I live in physical and mental anguish, not because the landlady is banging on the door nonstop and I face eviction, not that Congress and the president have sent a strong message that they no longer help the unemployed. It's because I'm a law-abiding, though worthless, long-term employed older man who is surplus population. Had I used my college education to rip people off and steal from the elderly, poor, disabled, and Main Street Americans, I'd be wearing different shoes now. I'd be a petty king. Hard work, honesty, loving kindness, charity, and mercy, and becoming unemployed and destitute, unable to pay your bills, are all considered foolishness now and high crimes in America. Whereas stealing and lying and cheating and being greedy to excess and destroying the fabric of America is rewarded and protected, making such people petty kings and queens among us. We taxpayers have handed trillions of dollars to the same bank and insurance industries that started our economic disaster with its reckless gambling. We distributed tax cuts to businesses. For our dollars, we have been rewarded with starvation, homelessness, and a plague of fear. I am college educated and worked 35 years in management, receiving written references and praise from every boss for whom I worked. Yet after thousands of resumes, applications, emails, phone calls, and drop-ins, I failed to get a job even at McDonald's. I've discovered there's 3 strikes against me most 99ers will understand. Strike 1, businesses are not hiring long-term unemployed. In fact, many job ads now say unemployed need not apply. Strike 2, I am almost 60 years old. Strike 3, for every job opening I've applied, there are over 300 applicants. I believe the Congress and President have no intention of really aiding the unemployed due to various political reasons. Had they really wanted to help us, they could have used unspent stimulus monies or cut foolish costs like the failed wars or foreign aid and farm subsidies. Just the unspent stimulus money alone could have taken care of all unemployed persons for 5 years or until the unemployment rate reached 7% if Congress and the President really wanted to help us. So here I am, long-term, unemployed, older man with chronic health problems, now totally broke, hungry, facing eviction. So I have the freedom to be homeless and destitute and pursue happiness, he puts that in quotes, in garbage cans, and then die. Yay for America, huh? So the only option left for me is merciful self-euthanasia. It is with a heavy heart that I've set my death in motion, but what I am facing is not living. So off I go. I've made peace with God and placed my burden on Jesus, and he forgives me. This nation has become evil to the core, with cold-hearted politicians and tycoons squeezing what little Main Street Americans have left. It is not the America into which I was born. It is now the land of the tycoon haves and the rest of us have-nots who march into hopelessness and despair. I can't help but juxtapose our plight to the tycoons. They steal from pension funds, banks, the people in government, and little Wall Street investors. Then rather than face punishment, they become the petty kings in this world. This new America is alien to me. It is an America of greed and corruption and avarice and mean-spirited selfishness and hatred of the common good. I am not welcome here anymore. I must go home. My home is somewhere else. Goodbye.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 866-987-THOM.
And he ends goodbye, and God bless you all. How many more Americans will the GOP murder before we wake up? A shocking headline from a Swiss newspaper. This from a piece in Alternate by Democrats Ramschild. That's a German Democratic club. Shocking headline from a Swiss newspaper, the Berliner Zeitung, reads, Hunger in the Land of the Big Mac. And it's a story of people collecting food in the United States from food banks. They note, unlike here in the United States, unlike here in Germany, jobless benefits never run out. All job seekers continue to be medically insured, as are their families. The fellow whose letter I just read talked about how he had diabetes, type 2 diabetes, mild heart failure, diabetic retinopathy, and if he had to go out and scavenge through garbage cans, which was now his only choice, he would probably start losing toes and fingers, because that's what happens to diabetics in the winter and the cold. As the German jobless benefit system, when jobless benefit 1 runs out, jobless benefit 2, known as Hartz IV, kicks in. No one ever gets cut off. Europeans routinely recoil. Well, let me give you the whole context. As you can imagine, the estimated 2 million unemployed Americans who had almost no benefits this Christmas seems a particular horror show to Europeans, made worse by the fact that the U.S. government does not provide any medical insurance to American unemployed recipients. Europeans routinely recoil at that in disbelief and disgust. Der Spiegel, which is the German edition of, or version of Time magazine, had a story about a woman named Pam Brown, a former executive assistant on Wall Street who's now living as a homeless person. American society is breaking apart. Millions of people have lost their jobs and fallen into poverty. Among them, for the first time, are many middle-class families. Meet Pam Brown from New York, whose life changed overnight. The crisis caught her unprepared. It was horrible, Pam Brown remembers. Overnight, I found myself on the wrong side of the fence. It never occurred to me that something like this could happen to me. She sits in a cheap diner on West 14th Street in Manhattan, stirring her $1.35 coffee. That's all she orders. It's too late for breakfast, too early for lunch. She also needs to save money. She's unemployed, having to make do in a tiny one-bedroom in the Bronx. Okay. The other thing I want to share with you, and then I'll pick up your phone calls. I've shared this with you before. This was published in 2002, but it's a 100-year-long study, so I think that it's, we can consider it still valid. You can find this over at BBC News by simply Googling BBC News, more suicides under conservative rule. I will read you, this is not an op-ed piece. This is a news story. What they are reporting is research published in the Journal of Epidemiology and Community Health. And here's what the BBC says. The lead sentence. The suicide rate increases under conservative governments, research suggests. Scientists found the suicide rate in the country, they're talking about the UK and Australia, increased significantly when a conservative government was in power. They looked at suicide statistics from 1901 to 1998. They took into account periods of drought and World War II, but after adjusting for these factors, I'm quoting from the BBC, after adjusting for these factors, the figures clearly showed the highest rates of suicide occurred when both conservative and federal government, conservative state and federal governments were in power. Middle-aged and older people were most at risk. When the conservatives ruled both state and federal governments, Men were 17% more likely to commit suicide than when Labor was in power, Labor being their version of Democrats. Women were 40% more likely to kill themselves. In a series of accompanying editorials, they talk about some of the commentary on this article, but then they get back to the article, and the BBC wraps it up by saying, overall, they say, the researchers, the figures suggest that 35,000 people would not have died had the Conservatives never been in power, equivalent to one suicide every day of the 20th century or two for every day that the Conservatives ruled.